you hear that? She said Captain Kirk right there.
She did. I guess it's in any language.
That's right. Captain Kirk transfers. I remember that when that song first came out because before she recorded the English version, kind of badly, that German version, you're just going along and all of a sudden Captain Kirk pops up. So it's 99 Luftballons.
And why?
What's the line? Everyone's a superhero. Everyone's a Captain Kirk. So yeah, there's not really German for Captain Kirk. She could have yelled, just God! Everybody would have known. So that's a little clue as to what we're doing this week. Finally, we're getting around to our special guest, which we'll introduce here in a minute. And we're talking about our favorite German horror flicks. So that's right up my ancestral alley, at least a little bit. So we'll get to that. But first, we got to say some thank yous and take care of some housekeeping from last week when it was the Fright Club Live.
It was. And we did the Are They Really a Vampire? Countdown. And Lisa G on Twitter, she wanted to shout out to all of the songs you pick, George Wolf.
Thanks, Lisa G. I turned that mother out.
That's right. I think she's a Concrete Blonde fan.
That was a good one.
It was a good one.
That's one of those that people hear and they probably remember it, but then have kind of forgot. Yeah,
it's a good one.
That was kind of a jam. They had a couple of songs back then. Thank you, Lisa G.
And our buddy Silas agrees that Milo and Otis is a terrifying film.
I know. If you missed it last week, why? And second of all, you have to go back. It turned into this Milo and Otis conversation. It all started with Hope having a beer, and next thing you know, we're talking about Milo and Otis, and it is terrifying. Thank you, Silas. And our B-movie bro, Paul, was happy to see Martin at the top of that list.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
It is. That was good to get that one at the top of the list and talk about those, and also to see the reflecting skin, because
yes,
a lot of the crowd had not seen that flick. And
I guarantee nobody has seen it on a big screen, myself included.
And it's not a traditional, as we said, not a traditional horror film, but I think most of the crowd was digging it.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of horrific. I mean, it's not super bloody, but it's got a David Lynch feel about it that you can't shake, which I love.
It does. They were either digging it or just being polite. So either way, we appreciate that. And
speaking of polite, we called Knack Mac a malcontent.
Yeah, why did we do that?
I don't remember why. I mean, it fits. He certainly is one. No, I'm just kidding. He doesn't mind the malcontent, but I think you sighed, and so he thinks he's going to have to stop making comments on Twitter that you're tired of him. But it's not true.
I didn't sigh. I said he...
You probably sighed at me. I was probably drinking.
He commented of my fair enough, where I said fair enough, which I kind of do sometimes. That's a little crutch I have, I think. But yeah, it wasn't a sigh, was it?
I don't know. I'm going to say if you were tired of anything, it was probably me.
Yeah, I'm not tired of you, man. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. We appreciate it always. So that's fair enough.
Yeah. And last one, Mike, who's been listening to old podcasts. And we opened him up to found footage, which is ironic because, of course, I hated found footage until we decided I was going to do that topic as well. And we found a bunch that were really good, and he liked. It was the magic of Troll Hunter.
It always is.
It is, isn't it?
It really always is the magic of Troll Hunter. So thank you for that. It was Fright Club Live. We look forward to the next edition of Fright Club Live, which is coming up on Wednesday, September 13th. And it's going to be Ginger Snaps.
Woohoo! We're going to talk about evil sisters.
Well, you know about that. And, by the way, we want to thank the Gateway Film Center always. But we were just hip to the fact that they put out on the website, gatewayfilmcenter.org, they've got all the rest of the films, the Fright Club Live films for the rest of the year.
The rest of the lineup up there. Yeah. So just go to gatewayfilmcenter.org and just search Fright Club, and you'll see everything we have planned for the rest of this year.
And speaking of, next year, we weren't speaking of, but we will now. You're hard at work on the schedule for next year, 2018.
I am. I've got it narrowed down to I think 17 or 18 movies. So I got some pruning yet to do. I have to figure out when is the best, so we don't have 3 really bloody terribles.
Right.
Kind of even it out a little bit.
That's the kind of thought that goes into this. See, it's scheduling, it's programming for your viewing and listening enjoyment.
That's right.
That's what we're doing here. So all that is coming up, but we got to get to the topic at hand, and that is our favorite German horror films, and we welcome our special guest. We've been trying to schedule this now for a long time.
We have.
Fright Clubber
He's
number
just too busy,
one.
and he's been ignoring us, and it's not because we keep pushing him back after we have scheduled somebody else. That's not what happened.
Welcome, John Dean.
It's not my schedule that pushed this back. I think everyone knows that.
Yes.
I'm pretty available most of the time. Thank you for having me.
We just swung by World of Beer, assuming he'd be there, and we dragged him over.
That's
pretty much how it goes.
He just calls up World of Beer. Are there any messages for me? Yes. Hope and George, we're looking for you. Yeah. So after some delay, you're back, and we've got a list. We've each got a top 5, and it's pretty close.
It is.
There's some discrepancy in the order, and 1 or 2 movies that we have that you don't. But was this a topic? Did you guys choose this together? I know you were kicking around some of your favorite genres. Is this one?
Well, this really has its roots as a topic of discovery for me. In that a couple years ago, my mother-in-law got me one of those like DNA spit test things, and as luck would have it, I'm like 2/3 German.
Okay.
And as if the blonde hair, blue eyes, and ability to drink beer by the liter
Right,
didn't give it
exactly.
away.
Yeah, the lederhosen doesn't help either.
But it was not a topic I was very familiar with in the horror arena. And I had enjoyed some of your previous country of origin podcasts in the past, especially that Korean podcast. But
yeah.
As I found here, the Germans are a little more succinct when it comes to their storytelling.
They are. It's actually, I'm a little surprised we haven't done it before. Germany has a phenomenal history in the genre, like phenomenal, because some of the very, very earliest films, and we'll talk about that in a bit, from the 20s are German.
Right.
And then sort of when the world wars broke out, the Film Commission turned to just propaganda, and a lot of the greatest artists of the country were sort of, they left.
Yeah.
They left the country or died. And then it took a long time for them to rebuild. So you'll see this huge gap of decades. And then they came back strong. I mean, it's an incredibly bountiful nation in terms of horror films. So I'm excited that we're finally doing it.
Yeah, so we've each got a top 5. Before we get to that, you want to talk about, you did some cutting and pasting and some reworking and got the list to know, and you sent me 3 different versions before you settled on your final version.
Did.
So do you want to talk about the ones that just didn't quite make it?
No, I tell you what, Germany have a lot of films. So Necromantic 2, and then there's another one about a killer penis. Those 3 did not make this list, but they really piqued my interest. I remember thinking, like, as I was sort of like, damn, this is a lot of movies on this one particular weird topic. So we may have another podcast just on that, but there are a bunch that I kept trying to fit in and just couldn't. And one of them is Mark of the Devil, which is one of those like Witchfinder General style, horror films. And Udo Kier is in it, who of course I love. And it's very dated, but it's still a great movie, and it's really difficult to watch. It's very horrific, and a lot of times those witch films can be, and I really wanted that on there. A couple of others I honestly I thought would be. Like, I just couldn't believe that I wound up with a list that didn't have these on. And one is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which of course has been on many of our podcasts before. It's a brilliant, gorgeous...
Yeah, and that's one of the ones you were talking about going way back to the history. In fact, a lot of people point to that as maybe, the first quote-unquote horror film. You can have an argument there, but at least it's in that team picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, it looks like nothing else.
Right,
and when you watch it, you see it pop up in so many films since then. And then the other one that, I'm going to be honest with you, I watched it again in preparation for this, and then it originally was in the very definitely in the running. And then as I watched it again, I realized that it's a bit slower and a bit campier than maybe I had recalled it being. So Werner Herzog's Nosferatu the Vampire did not make it.
I'm kind of surprised at that, too.
It made the early cut. It definitely did, but it didn't make the final cut. And then the one other, I don't think I really thought it was going to make it, but I've always kind of wanted to talk about it, is this movie called The Fan from 1982. It's very 1982, and it's about like a fanatic of sort of a pretty boy band. Let's say Duran Duran, Germany's version of Duran Duran. It's about one pathological, insane fan of Germany's version of Duran Duran and the lengths that she goes to keep her beloved forever. And it's incredibly slow and super weird. But weird in a good way.
Somewhat similar to the Robert De Niro, Wesley Snipes, The Fan from the 90s. Remember that one?
Yeah, I do remember that one. No, it's not like that at all, because I don't think either one of them eats the other one.
I don't think so, no.
So those were the ones that didn't quite make my list. Did you have any that you were considering and then dropped?
I had a few that really just kind of got pushed out. And I think you mentioned them. Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, that was one. Absolutely beautiful. Enjoy that movie. There's just too many things to put in front of it on this list.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the bubbling under. Let's get to the actual meat and potatoes here. We'll start at number 5. And this one actually, happily, is number 5 on both of our lists. And it's just when Michael arrives in Berlin to visit his ex-girlfriend, a terrible virus starts spreading across the city at a rapid pace, turning people into mindless, homicidal maniacs. From 2010, it's Rambach, Berlin Undead.
So as I think I mentioned a little earlier, the Germans pace for their movies. They're a little more brisk. This one is a very quick 63 minutes, which is surprising, but it was fine with me. After I had watched it the first time, I went back to start timing some of the appearances. I mean, you get the first hint that something is wrong 2 minutes into this movie.
Right.
You hear a siren in the background and some general mayhem. The first zombie attack happens at 6 minutes into this movie, which was phenomenal. But I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for zombie movies, and this one was a lot of fun. It was a pretty quick but fun ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love this movie, and I don't think I thought I would when I first saw it, because on the surface, it's kind of a cross between 28 Days Later and Quarantine, or Wreck, right? Because they're trapped inside an apartment building, and rather than being, zombies, it's like a rage virus, very much like 28 Days Later, and when you do get outside, you just get this decimated, major metropolitan cities, like again, 28 Days Later. It kind of had all those things going against it, but I just loved it. And a lot of it was the quick pace, and a lot of it was Michael is just sort of this so believable everyday guy. He's just, he's just a dude that you totally buy. And then I really think that the other apartment dwellers, their humanity and humor are really engaging. They really bring you into this sort of, let's try this. Let's see if we can make this happen. Let's, and more than I think most, especially zombie films, other than maybe One of the Dead, I found myself rooting so hard that they make it. I wanted so badly, which in a lot of movies, I mean, I'm a little jaded. I've seen a couple of horror films and you're just like, oh, they're going to die. Oh, how long till this one goes? And I didn't feel that way in this one. I was incredibly optimistic and eager for them to do well. I just think it's a fun movie, and it's just one that really pulls you in, regardless of the fact that it's over in, barely over an hour.
So that's number 5 on both of our lists, Rambach, Berlin Undead. And before we start going our separate ways here on the list, John, we've referred to him before as Fright Clubber number 1,
That's
because
right.
he goes all the way back to our first Fright Club Live a couple of theaters ago, and at least a couple of years ago, or was it 3? How far back do we go? Anyway, been there from the start. So other than that, just quickly, your history as a horror fan.
Okay, well, I really got into horror movies in college, which, I mean, you get into a lot of things in college, I suppose, but for me, it was horror movies. And it was my girlfriend at the time, wife now, Heather, who I think we started dating in the fall of 99. And one of the first things we did was sat down and watched all the Halloweens back to back to back.
Nice.
Because she couldn't believe I hadn't seen them. And so that has really kind of
So
spawned...
she's to blame.
She is.
I always assumed
everything.
Heather was to blame, but...
It's true. And I don't have hobbies, I have obsessions. So if I get the bug on anything, I don't half-ass anything. It's a whole ass.
So whole ass on beer and horror movies.
And baseball.
And baseball.
Nice.
We got to respect that.
That's why we like this
We
guy.
can respect that. All right. So moving up to number 4 on our list, it's the story of a wolf striving through the woods around an isolated German village. And Jacob, the young local police officer, is onto him, but sensed something more in the darkness. From 2014, Der Samurai.
Bukowski, and that's a name.
I love that name.
I know, that's a name to get behind. So he stars as Der Samurai, and he cuts an impressive figure. He is in this film, and the way that they frame him from the beginning, he's very, to say androgynous isn't exactly it. He's shown up in this town with a samurai sword to do some serious damage. He's also wearing a lovely white gown, and for some of it, some very bright red lipstick. It's never
Sunday go-to-meeting clothes.
Exactly. It's never explained. It's never suggested as to what's going on there. It doesn't matter in the slightest. He kills a great number of people. But he has an unusual sort of chemistry with the sole, really, police officer on duty, who the police chief and most of the town inhabitants think of as being very soft. So as we start the film, he is supposed to kill this wolf who is causing damage, and he just can't bring himself to do it. And they knew he wouldn't because he's soft. It's really a very bizarre and dreamy sort of twisted fairy tale. It brings in a lot of images from particularly Brothers Grimm, Germanic folklore.
Right.
And then also really, it's very focused on sort of either embrace the monster within or discard it forever. But it doesn't do it in that Jekyll and Hyde kind of way. It does it in a very psychosexual way that I think was handled brilliantly, and I don't think we've seen particularly well in other horror films.
I do want to point out on this one, it's 79 minutes, so we're 2 movies in, a double feature. We're still not up to one Korean horror movie.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And that is our number 4, Der Samurai. So your number 4, John, you've actually got one that we talked about in our Not Quite Made It. What do you have?
It's Anatomy,
Right.
which is a story of a young woman who wins a place at a very exclusive medical school.
Mm-hmm.
She gets there. Her grandfather has roots in this school. He was, one of the leaders of it in the past. Very dry humor. I mean, when she goes to the hospital to tell him that she made it, he asks, "Can you pull the plug on your way out?" I mean, that seems kind of, I'm not sure what it seems like, but I'm like, that seems German.
A bit wicked.
Yeah.
German.
But anyway, she makes her way there. She finds that this group, the society, this group of people that have a different way of handling cadavers and dissection, and perhaps maybe get more out of the victims, I'll say here, are alive. So I thought it was great. And this was also the only one that we watched, or I watched in preparation for this, that had Nazis in it. And that kind of surprised me a little bit.
Right. It turns out I think Germans don't celebrate that very much.
Yeah, and I can see why. I can understand that. But obviously, I would see that as a source of horror, something that would...
Oh, yeah.
It's horrific, definitely.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Fertile ground, but this was the only one.
Right. And actually that film was the highest grossing film in Germany in 2000. It was a huge, enormous smash hit in Germany the year that it came out, which I thought was fascinating because I'd never heard of it. I mean, I didn't hear about it for several years. Franca Potent is the student. She's always great. The medical horror, the body horror in this is very interestingly, graphically, but not super bloody in the way that it's done. It's got a little bit of a Cronenberg feel about it, which of course I always love. It turns into a little bit too much of a slasher for me, although there is some dark humor to it that I think is interesting and compelling. But it's a super fun movie and uncomfortable.
So John's number 4 for German horror is Anatomy from 2000. Moving up to our number 3, and this is actually John's number 2. So we are all 3 digging this movie. Twin boys move to a new home with their mother after she has face-changing cosmetic surgery, but under her bandages is someone the children don't recognize. We love this from 2014. Good Night, Mommy.
Mama?
This was interesting because when you were making up the list, I know you forgot about this for a
did.
while and then said, "Oh, I forgot Goodnight Mommy." Well, that's going in there. That has to go in there because this one, we've talked about it and we fell all over the place about it in our list of 2014, not only in horror, but in overall films because it was so effective.
It's dreamlike. It's twins, which of course love. Any horror movie that has twins in them, I'm all on board. It's Austrian. Point of fact, which is one of the reasons why I think it didn't come up at first in my head to put it on here. But it is German language, so we went ahead because both John and I and of course you as well, we all wanted to talk about it. So it's on the list.
Yeah, it's on the list.
Damn you, my rules.
That I know from the beginning. It's always been Hope's rules.
That's right. And they auditioned 240 twins. This is twins. Before they found these two, who are great, by the way. And they didn't. None of the actors were given the script until they started filming. It was filmed chronologically.
Nice.
And it has, you mentioned the visuals, it has such a dreamlike feel.
It does.
Some of the images are nightmarish.
Yeah.
And, we're not going to give away the ending, whether you guess it or not. I don't think it matters.
No, I think you're right. One of the things that can be a disappointment when you're first watching it is you say to yourself, "Oh, I've already figured this out." But I think one of the strengths of the film is that's not the only thing that they have you guessing about. It simply isn't. And also what I think is really powerful, and the same thing with The Reflecting Skin, one of the things if you do it well, you've got a great movie on your hands, is that it tells a story from the point of view of these children. So there are oftentimes, they simply accept something, and as a viewer, you're like, why are there so many bones in that cave right now? Nobody's going to explain this to me, are they? No, because these kids just accept that it's there. What's the deal with those slug things? But it's an incredibly effective, again, nightmare about parenthood, but it's not just from the point of view of the parent. It is. Yeah. It's nightmarish for the parent, but it's also quite nightmarish from the child's perspective, which I think, so I just think it works on like every level.
You had referenced the what I'll call the primary twist.
Right.
I never saw it as a twist. I thought it was rather obvious.
Well, see, but that's all right, too. And that's another way of looking at it, which I still don't think it matters.
Yeah, it didn't.
Right.
I mean, I saw, and by the time I got to the end, I'm like, I'm about 80% sure that this was an obvious plot point, not something
I can
was
see
hidden
that.
from us.
I can see
I
that.
thought it was rather obvious, and I still loved the movie. First time through, second time through, third time through, every time through.
Yep, that's exactly the way I feel about it, and that's Good Night, Mommy. We all love that. Our number 3 and John's number 2 on our list of the top German horror. And moving up to our number 2, and this one actually is one that John has at number 1. So, again, we're in a lot of agreement here. 2 violent young men take a mother, father, and son hostage in their vacation cabin and force them to play sadistic games with one another for their own amusement. From 1979, the original Michael Haneke's Funny Games. We've talked about this one before.
Was gibt's denn noch?
Man, it's so chilling. And of course, the thing to remember here is that a few years later, he made a shot-for-shot American remake that is also chilling. But obviously here, we're talking about the original, and this is the one that first got it on the radar and had people... I think this is a movie that people got upset about, of what he was doing once they got into it. Some people, didn't like the, for lack of a better term, games he was playing with the audience here, but there was a point to it, and it was so effective.
So the reason this one is number 1 for me is it makes me so uncomfortable to watch from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
And between the German original and the American remake, I've seen this, I don't know, probably 9, 10, maybe a dozen times. I don't know. And it's that same feeling of all the horror I've seen, that egg scene near the beginning, as you're starting to realize something's not right with these two boys. Oh, it just squirms. It gets under my skin. And I hate it. I want to burrow into the back of the couch every single time. And it's really because I think he's taking manners and social interactions that are normal and everyday, things that all of us experience a million times a day. And he just perverts them. Right. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it at this point. But with the eggs and the, well, aren't you going to give us some more? And I'm like, holy cow. And then, of course, what comes when you get near the end of the movie, just how nonchalant they are about the things that they are doing, which are horrific.
Yeah, I think so. Michael Haneke is one of the greatest filmmakers ever of all time.
Yeah, no matter what language he's working in or what genre he's
German,
working in.
French, English.
See his movies.
See them all. See them all. See them more than once, and in this case, you can because he made it twice. And I think you're right, particularly about the villains. And in both films, the teenage boys are magnificent. In the German language film, Arno Frisch and Ulrich Muhl play the two teens, and they are perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's just this sort of bored sadism wafts from them, and so authentically and brilliantly. And I actually think, in a way that strikes me as very German, the behavior of these two boys. And I actually think that, and you can see it in The White Ribbon, another Haneke masterpiece, is that he seems very, to me, interested in the Germanic sort of root in what became Nazism, and then in this one, sort of what's left over. Like, what is it? But he's doing something with teens that, you know, that you see in A Clockwork Orange, or, I mean, you see this in a lot of films, the idea that teens are just brutes and bored and sadistic, and the mayhem that they can create with that. But I think the brilliance here, besides the way he toys with sort of social interaction, is that he doesn't like horror films, and he's made a horror film basically to sort of point the finger back at us, right? We're participating in the brutalization of this family, and he's very clear in the way he films it that we are. Oh, yes. We are part of this. It's happening because we're here. That's the only reason it's happening. But it's brilliant.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. His intention, he has stated before that his intention was not to make the quote-unquote horror film, but rather a comment about the influence of media violence on society, and was pretty sure that many people were going to misunderstand the whole thing. I think he's right about that. But when you, especially on multiple viewings, you can really see where he's going and why people are uncomfortable with it for those reasons that they are forced to admit that they're part of this. And that was where it becomes so effective.
And just in case you miss it, I mean, they break the fourth wall and explain it to us.
Exactly.
And make it rather obvious.
Yeah. Even up to that one, you know, it's not a huge spoiler, at one point where they say, the one character says, Paul says the line, "We're not up to feature film length yet." That comes right at the 95-minute mark. So yeah, it's down to, it's the way he makes movies. I mean, it's so precise.
Yeah.
It's so well done. And it's a great, as you say, John, very uncomfortable comment on, basically he's almost saying to the audience, why are you watching this?
Exactly.
And why are you enjoying it?
Right.
And think about that. And it's chilling. Funny Games, the original German language version from 1979, is our number 2 and John's number 1. And that moves us up to our number 1. You could probably guess all the way back to 1922. Vampire Count Orlok in Nosferatu.
So a sentimental favorite.
And this is John's number 3, so it's up there for you as well.
Sure. And actually, I realized after watching Nosferatu the Vampire, this one, very, very similar.
Oh, absolutely.
But still, just looking at comparing the two, thinking about it, as it became obvious that both couldn't make the list, Nosferatu is the obvious pick for me.
I mean, it's a brilliant movie. It's an amazing, groundbreaking feat in cinema. Technically speaking, the way he uses shadow, the way he uses practical effects in a way that clearly 1920s and 1922 had never been done before. F.W. Murnau. There are so many things about it that are amazing and brilliant and still scary today, regardless of the fact that it is a silent film. And so you've got that sort of, that very dramatic overacting that they did in the silence. It seems quaint today, but it's still really, really creepy.
And just the look of the character.
Oh, it looks,
Oh, man.
Max Schreck. That's the thing, right? When it comes down to it. My favorite vampire of all time is Count Orlok, of all time. And one of the things I love about this, and of course, so Murnau was trying to make Dracula and he couldn't get the rights. And so he just changed a few things, the names, obviously. Got sued anyway.
Yeah.
So he did change some things about it, but it was it was the earliest version of Dracula on film. And what we've grown used to since then is this very romantic figure. And that is not, he likened it to the plague, which was fascinating. And so for that reason, then, his vampire is very rat-like. He's vermin-like.
Oh, yeah.
He's
Looks
not
like
seductive
a rat,
in any way, And I think that that's a fascinating way to look at, because in most versions of Dracula, he's sort of this, eternal life. Whereas this is much more like doom and nasty, and his look is so perfect, and there's just big claws for fingers, and he just looks like a big naked mole rat. I love him. I love this movie. I love everything that they did with it in terms of just the look of it, and so it had to be number 1 for me.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned it changed things because they didn't want to get sued. One of the biggest things they changed was it was the first vampire story to bring up the idea of sunlight being lethal to vampires, and since then that has become just an accepted part of vampire lore. But like you said, they got sued anyway.
Even though it was obvious in some of the shots that they were filmed in the daylight.
Yes, that is true.
So the word I wrote down for this was just mesmerized. And I think as a fanboy and not a critic, I don't have to appreciate it for all the very acceptable and necessary reasons and accurate reasons that you do. I was mesmerized from beginning to end.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one little break kind of in the middle where the professor character was going over the predatory plants and things like that. and I found myself just very enthralled by that. I mean, who doesn't like to see a Venus flytrap chow down on a bug? I mean,
Absolutely.
which was not in the second one.
And you were mentioning, too, timing things out. Actually, Count Orlok doesn't come into this movie until 21 minutes into the film. And even then, he's only on screen for less than 10 minutes throughout the entire film. But you can't take your eyes off of him.
No.
And you mentioned the way they use light and shadow. That makes it mesmerizing for me. And yes, it is apparent sometimes that they weren't filming at night. But still, it casts that nightmarish image, especially with the way Orlok looks, that just is one of those where you just can't look away.
Yeah, no, it's really true. And, a lot of filmmakers, Herzog used a lot of the same sort of light and shadow play when he made Nosferatu the Vampire. And, of course, in Coppola's version, he goes to town with the way the shadows behave.
Oh, yeah.
But it all started with Murnau, the way he makes him part of the shadow world. And I think that his vision, you don't see it as much. You see it, and when you do, when an Orlok-style vampire pops up in, What We Do in the Shadows, or it really stands out. You're like, oh, look! You don't see that style of vampire very much, but the balance of what he did really did create an architecture that most vampire movies, as you mentioned, the sunlight, have stolen, which we're okay with because they're good ideas. That's right.
So
he literally stole it and was sued.
So we are all Team Orlok, and that is Nosferatu, our number 1, and John's number 3. A winner all around on our list of the top 5 German horror films. All right, what do you think? With our picks, you got some that should have made the list and thought that we didn't talk about, let us know. It's easy to keep the conversation going on Twitter. That's the best way. We are at Mad Wolf, MADDWOLF. Are you on Twitter, John?
Not really. I have a handle, but I think I have like 70 tweets to my name over like a decade.
Well, let's kick it off. What are you on Twitter?
Well, and because I don't know how to create a handle, it's JHNMDN and the number 1.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
It's just my name without vowels. That's really what it is. But I am on Facebook, and you can find me stalking the Columbus Horror Society page quite a bit.
Absolutely.
That's right, and that's always good to do. So we look forward to our next Fright Club Live. We talked about it a little bit, but mark it down if you can make it. It's the second Wednesday of every month. Our home away from home is the Gateway Film Center right there on High Street, Columbus, Ohio, which, by the way, let's give another plug to the Nightmares Film Festival, which is coming up in October. Let me tell you, if you can make it. And we heard from one of the new Fright Clubbers, Letitia. I think she's planning on coming.
Nice.
So, if you're in the area, it is going to be a fantastic few days full of horror movies and just, making a communal experience with filmmakers and film fans. So
you're going, are you, John?
Yes, I've got my ticket. I will be at the Gateway and World of Beer for the entire weekend.
I mean, you can fall down to Gateway and be at World of Beer, which you've probably done. But
yeah, more than once. More than a dozen times.
So, make that if you can. And as we said, the next Fright Club Live, September 13th at the Gateway. That is going to be Ginger Snaps, and the topic is...
Sisters. We actually have a bonus Fright Club because there are 5 weeks in this month. So there's one in between now and then. Back to school. We're going to do one on scary teachers.
Oh, nice.
I'm looking forward to that.
So much going on. So look us up, like I've said, on Twitter at Mad Wolf. The main website is madwolf.com. You can check out all our reviews of horror films, non-horror films, and just a lot of overall fun. And our Facebook page is Mad Wolf Columbus. So much going on. We look forward to hearing from you. Until the next time, I'm George Wolf.
I'm Hope Madden.
And he is John Dean. And this is the Fright Club Podcast. You ready for this? In German.
Bleiben Sie schrecklich, meine Freunde.
Nice!